Item 1 on your agenda is the sediment. Mr Moody, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie. Present. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander. Present. Councillor Balfour. Present. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Present. Councillor Black. Present. Councillor Blackwood. Present. Councillor Bowes. Present. Councillor Coleman. Present. Councillor Colley. Present. Councillor Coombs. Here. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Present. Councillor Goldie. Present. Councillor Grant. Present. Councillor Harris. Present. Councillor Hughes. Present. Councillor Kerr. Here. Councillor McHugh. Present. Councillor McCluckie. Here. Councillor Meiklejohn. Present. Councillor Monroe. Present. Councillor Murtagh.
I'm sure.
Councillor Nicholl. Present. Councillor Nimmo. Present. Councillor Patrick. Present. Councillor Reid. Present. And Councillor Spears.
Okay, thank you. Declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read it out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations at this time?
Provost, although I didn't have a direct interest in the plan issue item 11, I will not be taking part in that item. Members will know that I was the subject to an investigation concerning a plan issue, and there's still no outcome from that investigation. I will expect to be cleared of any wrongdoing. I understand the importance of public perception, obviously with the Code of Conduct. And although everybody that spoke to me is fully supportive, and obviously, you know, that's great to ken, there could be people out there that still thinks maybe I shouldn't take part. So I will withdraw for that item.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Kerr.
As Councillor McCluckie already stated, I will also have no direct interest in the planning issue in item 11 and will not take part. Also, members will know that I was subject to an investigation concerning a planning issue, and also there is still no outcome from that investigation. As Councillor McCluckie says, I expect to be cleared of any wrongdoing and understand that the public perception, so I will not take part in item 11 for clarity.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other declarations at this time? No lights on? Okay, thank you very much. That takes 3A, minute of the meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 5th of December 2018. It's pages 4 to 16 on your agenda. Any questions arising from that minute, or can we agree the minute? Agreed. Thank you very much. Takes us to item of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 23rd of January 2019. Pages 17 to 20 on your agenda. Can we agree that minute? Are there any questions arising? Agreed. Thank you very much. To item 3C, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 27th of February 2019. That was the supplementary agenda. Any questions arising from that minute, or can you agree the minute? Agreed the minute. 3D, which is the volume of minutes. Any questions in relation to the volume of minutes? And if you have, you can maybe direct us to the page. Councillor Reid.
Yes, there was a meeting of Sestran on 21st September. It's in the volume.
Have you got a page for everybody?
I wish I had. I don't. It was a reference in quite a wad of...
149 onwards. Okay, thank you.
It was a reference to the difficulties faced by disabled people at Graveston Station. I don't know if it was Councillor Colley who raised it or not. As you may know, if you're crossing from the north platform to the south, you have to go walk away around, and you actually come to a bit where there's no pavement going down to Graveston Station on the south side. It's an item, as Councillor Meiklejohn will know from her background, has caused a lot of discussion. I just wondered if Seth Strand was picking it up.
I'll do my best. From at Sestran, there were a number of issues that have been discussed recently to do with travel plans and having active travel plans for different stations. I understand that ScotRail are undertaking this year to do access plans to Grahamston Station and I think Falkirk High. And we have an integrated mobility forum also and a disability forum which are looking at some of these issues. And these have been raised. So we have a CESTAN meeting coming up shortly, and I will ask that that's also pursued with specific reference to Grahamston Station. But I do understand that these things have been looked at as well, and that ScotRail are undertaking to do that as part of what they're doing for the travel plans for the stations.
Sorry to misname Councillor Colley.
Okay, Councillor Blackwood, question. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. It's on page 5, the 8th item down. It's Development Services, award of land, base stage 3 for Cloybank, Ponnybridge. I'm just wondering what this actually means.
I think you're ahead of your time here. I think it's the next item, information bulletin.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we'll come back to you. Right, first of all then, we've had Councillor Reid coming in relation to the volume of minutes. Any other questions arising for that volume of minutes so we can agree it? Agreed. Thank you very much. 3E, which is the information bulletin. Councillor Blackwood.
Did I repeat it? Provost, aye. It's page 5, item 8, Development Services, award of land based stage 3. I'm just wondering what award of land based stage 3 means. It's for Cloybank.
I need to get it checked out and get back to Councillor Blackwood.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions arising for the information bulletin? Councillor Cruz.
Thanks, Provost. Page 6. It's Corporate and Housing Services. The award of purchase of mobile microphones and voting facility for committee suites. I'm just a little bit puzzled that we seem to be doing an awful lot of talk about a new headquarters, and yet we're spending money. Unless I'm missing something, we seem to have clear recordings of all the meetings that we hold in here. So I was just wondering why this was deemed necessary. And a secondary question, and it may well just be my lack of knowledge. The item above it is about wireless energy, and I wondered if that was connected to the same installation. If somebody could clarify. Thanks.
Yes, Provost, I can answer in relation to the first of Councillor Coombs' questions in relation to the microphone system. I think members may have observed on a number of occasions that our current microphone system is reaching the end of its natural life. They've become more problematic as the years have gone on, and the system is now of such an age that it's not possible to actually buy parts to replace anything that becomes non-functional. This also is an opportunity, with great respect to our colleagues who are here from Tapestry, to dispense in the future with the services of Tapestry, so there will be a saving on the revenue budget on the cost of hiring Tapestry for each of the meetings of Council, the Executive and the Education Executive. And the reason for that is that the new microphone system has a recording capability, so we'll be able to do it ourselves. On the question of the new headquarters, we have made sure in procuring the new system that it will be fully portable to a new building, so the money which has been invested in it will last into the life of the new headquarters too. In relation to the second question, Provost, is it linked to the e-energy aspect? The answer is no, and I'm afraid I don't know any more about that particular aspect.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It's more comments on the bulletin. I mentioned it at the last meeting, Provost, about the lack of local firms getting tenders. I feel that it's important that we allow local companies to come in and tender. I'm unsure at this moment how many local firms are allowed to tender for each of the items. Also on page 48, Provost, the Workers' Memorial, a 3-metre high memorial in Calendar Riggs. It's a fitting memorial to the workers of Falkirk, who over the years suffered hardship, poor conditions, injuries, sometimes death. This is something that the whole of Falkirk can be proud of, and that the trade unions of Falkirk can be very proud of their contribution towards this memorial. Also on page 55, I think Councillor Bowes says this will be dear to him, about the refurb and fabric of the Adobe Hall. It was about time they put some money back into that old building. It's a great asset to the local area and very well used. And the last one, it leads on for the first question, Provost. On page 60, the collection of scrap metal, the 8 companies tendered and 3 were successful, none of which are for the local area. If we're wanting to make this area a vibrant area, I would like to see more local companies being able to tender. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. I think we all echo the sentiments about the new memorial and also the refurbishment of over in Larbert at Adobe Hall. I think we'll bring Mr Ritchie in. Mr Ritchie, could you maybe come in relation to the questions and concerns about local companies tendering? Would you like to come to the front here, Mr Ritchie? It's easier for everybody to see you and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I think I picked this up at the last meeting or the meeting before last. As far as our quick quotes are concerned, i.e. those tenders that we send out for contracts which are valued at £50,000 or less, tenders should go to at least 3 companies, one of whom should be a local supplier. Group of officers meet on a quarterly basis. It's called the Procurement Board. One of the things that we monitor on a quarterly basis is what the adherence has been to that requirement for one of the 3 tenderers to be a local company, and then look at what the outcome of the tendering exercise has been. So just to give members a reassurance that we're aware of the need to include local companies in the tendering process. That's been monitored, and as far as visibility of that for elected members is concerned, as well as seeing the quick quotes that have been awarded, at each council meeting there will be the annual procurement report which will come to the executive, which will give, as part of our performance indicators, the value of contracts that have been awarded to local companies.
I can say to you that, having been here for 27 years, that usually that issue gets brought up on a sort of yearly basis, and it's no a simple answer to what is a simple question. Councillor Reid, then Councillor Alexander. Thank you.
First question is page 29, Provost, the bypass at Lauriston. It's non-motorised user links, which I assume is in English pathways, but I wanted some details about that.
Mr. Duff, come to the floor again. Just like to come to the end there as well. Use the microphone. Thank you. Everybody can hear you and see you.
Again, I just need to get more details for you. It's another service, so I need to pick up with the contacts and roads about those works and get something off. Okay? Thank you.
I apologise, I didn't intend to speak to officers before the meeting, but I'm afraid the time ran out. So, but thanks very much, Mr. Duff, for that one. Page 39, again I may get the same reply. That's the internal alterations to the toilet at Calendar Park. But by the sum of money, I don't think it's changing places, and I wondered why this opportunity was perhaps missed to install one at Calendar Park. That's page 39.
Again, I'm happy to check that one out, so I'm not involved in the project, but I can check out if there has been capacity, if that's been looked at, and whether it's been feasible to consider that at Calendar House. Or again, get back.
It does recall an event on Calendar Park when I mistakenly went into the ladies because it had just opened. I thought it was a gents, and much to my horror, I heard the click of high heels. And, half an hour later, exited quite quickly. I would normally be constrained from mentioning Dobby Hall being a trustee, but since this is a fait accompli, I think I'd like to pay tribute to Councillor Bowes, who I think moved the project on at quite high speed. And we heard the shouts of hallelujah from the Arbor area last week. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Provost. I've got this picture in my head about Pat Reid wearing high heels now. But, hopefully it will shift soon. Just to give a wee bit more information to Councillor Kerr with regards to local contracts, as well as the information that's been given so far, every help and every assistance is given to the local companies to prepare themselves for the tender process. It is a complicated process, as the Provost has indicated, but every consideration is given to assisting local companies get that sharpening of the pencil, get the situation where they can submit tenders. There will be occasions when there will be no local companies because either the work seen is too much, too little, or whatever, just not suitable for their expertise, in which case we have to go with what's available. But I can assure Councillor Kerr that not just this administration, but previous administrations as well, have taken great pride in the amount of local contracts that are awarded, and we've done everything possible to make it feasible for companies to bid.
Thank you for clarification. Councillor Bowes.
I don't seem to have any choice but to say something on this. Can I say that Councillor Reid has been a bit modest, because he's been very much involved with the Trust as well in getting this over the line. Can I also thank Douglas and his team, because it has been a bit complicated. Those lovely people at Historic Environment Scotland have been involved, but we have got there with it, and it's really welcome to see it. The site huts are now on site and fences for it, so thank you to the officers for that.
Was that a bit tongue in the cheek, that one, in relation to Historic Scotland there? No, good idea. Okay, thank you. First of all, could I apologise? I hadn't apologised at the very beginning that apparently we haven't got any karaoke music this morning for you to go along with. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 4, questions. That takes us right on to item 5, the role and action log. 3, any questions arising from the role and action log, or can we agree? Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Provost. Item 380, the Bonnybridge Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidance, more commonly known as STAG. There was a scoping study being done, and the report was expected by the 19th of September last year. Is there any update on this, and why was the report late? And also, what was the result of the consultation that was scheduled to be completed by 2018?
Yes, happy to give an update. The survey work has been completed, and the pre-appraisal work, the survey work has been fed into the pre-appraisal work that's necessary for the STAG, and that work is currently underway. The results of the survey have been fully analysed. It's taken slightly longer than anticipated because of the extent of the information that's been given. The Council also attended a recent event by the Reinstate Bonnybridge Railway Station Group for the survey that has been carried out and give an update. The intention is that serving the survey material and distilling that in the pre-appraisal, we'd hope to have that completed by the end of this month, and the likelihood would be a report coming back to members probably in May.
Okay. Any other questions arising from the whole National Law Committee? Thank you very much. Item 7, the Chief Executive, pages 24 to 29, review of scrutiny. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. This report presents the recommendations of a review of scrutiny arrangements in the Council. The Council agreed on the 5th of December to review its scrutiny arrangements following consideration of the motion set out at paragraph 3.1. I met subsequently with Councillors Black, Meiklejohn and Munro, together with the Chief Governance Officer and Head of Policy, Technology and Improvement, to consider the operation of the scrutiny function. And that discussion focused on three main themes. The first was structures, the second support and capacity, and the third training and development. Members were clear about the importance of scrutiny and indicated a strong desire to reinvigorate the current scrutiny function with some modification. Members made a number of key observations about the current operation of scrutiny, including the fact that there is a disconnect between the performance panel and the scrutiny committee. There are very variable amounts of business for meetings of the scrutiny committee, leading sometimes to cancellations. There's a lack of elected member involvement in the scrutiny of service performance, and the limited pool of officers available to support scrutiny panels and policy development panels is also an issue. It was also made clear that there are opportunities to better develop the role of both elected members and officers in relation to scrutiny, and it was concluded that the key to reinvigorating the scrutiny function is to embed the benefits and value of effective scrutiny organisationally, to simplify the scrutiny arrangements and to provide more support to the scrutiny function. On the basis of that, the three review recommendations flowing from this are set out at paragraph 4.5, and they are firstly to remove the disconnect between the performance panel and the scrutiny committee by subsuming the work of the panel into the workload of the committee and disbanding the panel. And should Council agree to this proposal, a number of changes will be required to be made to standing orders, and these are set out at Appendix 1. Secondly, to reboot the organisational approach to scrutiny through training and development for elected members and officers. And thirdly, to utilise the opportunity afforded by the graduate and interim scheme, which was approved by the Executive on the 15th of January, to engage a graduate support officer to support the scrutiny panels, policy development panels and the scrutiny committees generally for a 2-year period. And on the basis of that, Provost, today the Council is invited to agree the recommendations set out in section 2 of the report.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you, Provost. Scrutiny is seen as a counterbalance to the Executive and that, the work of the Executive. But the role of scrutiny should not be seen or perceived as being less important than that of the Executive, and they should in fact complement each other. Scrutiny is a role for all members, not just the opposition, and it should be part of the performance and improvement cycle. Therefore, it is critical to what we do. Scrutiny should have a clear work plan with key standard reports. We know what's coming forward in the business. The agreed areas for more in-depth forensic items being agreed by Council, and that will then emanate discussions through the performance and populate the ongoing work of the scrutiny. And I do believe that probably needs to be refreshed and perhaps brought back to the scrutiny committee, and then for certainly Council to be informed of the plan going forward. The recommendations to join the performance panel with the scrutiny committee is something that has been discussed on many occasions, and in fact was part of a recommendation from Audit Scotland that should be held in public and as part of scrutiny. And as a result, I think this would be a good addition. However, I think the caveat that's included within the papers, where all members could still attend and participate within the performance aspect of it, I think is quite key to members being able to ask questions and to understand exactly what's going on within our services, and indeed help to inform areas for a deep dive for scrutiny, and obviously to bring our services to account. Training and scrutiny is something that all members, I think, could benefit from, and I include myself in that. Being able to question appropriately, solicit information, but knowing the right questions to ask, as we often don't know what we don't know. And that is something that we have to develop as a skill to doing that. And it should be forensically in-depth, looking at the services, and less about perhaps individual complaints that come through, and that could be dealt with in a different way. Use of graduates. No offence to our officers, but some fresh eyes and young legs, I think, is something that we should welcome. And having somebody that is able to do that research and have the enthusiasm for that research, pulling the papers together and the information, with the guidance, of course, of our very skilled officers, I think is something that we should encourage and welcome. And I think it will indeed enhance the scrutiny process and help to move things on. We're very aware that some of the scrutiny panels and the policy development panels have slipped a little, and that's not any criticism, as we have the same officers who service that part, that service the scrutiny committees, internal and external, and all the other committees as well. So I think that would be a good addition and gives some of our young people some good experience in developing within scrutiny. I'm therefore happy to move the recommendations as in section 2 and agreeing to combining the performance panel with the scrutiny, and looking at the use of our graduates and obviously anything else that flows from that. I think that having additional training is very welcome. However, I think that all members need to make a commitment to sign up for that and be part of the scrutiny process in doing so. I am happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Then Councillor Munro.
Happy to second convener, reserving the right.
Thank you very much. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to welcome the report. I think there was a very thorough discussion of the issues involved, which the Leader of the Council has articulated very thoroughly, and I would echo her sentiments in this matter. I think that the importance of checks and balances cannot be overemphasised, and the need for our members to all participate in this process is imperative, and therefore I recommend the report be taken up in full. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Thanks,
Thank
Provost.
you.
I'm really pleased with the prompt response and the conclusion from my motion to December's Council. I hope that the recommendations will ensure the smooth passage for the allocations scrutiny panel, which is starting the process just now, because that's an important one for all of us. Scrutiny is an important part of a councillor's role, and as the leader said, you need a strong counterbalance to the executive. That importance should be stressed to all our members of staff. We've discussed the councillor's role in that, but this is important for all members of staff as well. It needs to be taken seriously, while it needs to also be looked on as a positive experience, so that everyone can work together for a good outcome. So I'm really glad that this has been emphasised in the report, and I look forward to seeing what changes having the graduate will make to the process being done much more quickly. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, thank you.
Yes, I agree with most of what's been said, Provost, other than to hope that the scrutiny process sometimes accelerates a little bit. Some of the scrutiny panels have taken years to come to conclusions. My question, however, is on the appointment of the graduate. I take it he or she will be paid for the rate for the job, and it's not cheap labour.
Yes, I think there's a corporate graduate and internship programme, and yes, the graduate will be paid at a rate which is graded through the Council's grading process.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a motion moved and seconded. Everybody seems to be signing to the same hymn sheet in this one. Happy with the report? Has everybody agreed then? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much for that. Takes us to item 7, Falkirk Health and Social Care Partnership Update. During this presentation, there will be an opportunity because the agenda item has been read out and reported by Mr McElholm, who will be doing a presentation with the laptop issue. It's pages 30 to 45 in your agenda, and we'll bring forward Mr McElholm. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Provost. And if I can just introduce Lynette Denovan, who is one of our team managers, who will assist the presentation of the report with a short illustration of some of the work we're doing around the Living Will Falkirk website. Just a practical thing, so we don't have a microphone down there, so Lynette's going to speak from down there. If anybody can't hear, can we just indicate, because we've got a plan B for how we manage that, but so that's what we would do. So, presenting this report today on behalf of Patricia Cassidy, the Chief Officer, who would normally have done that, but can't be here today. So if I can just begin with the background. The report its purpose is to enable members to be updated on a twice-yearly basis of developments within the Health and Social Care Partnership. And this kind of recognised that there's a lot of change happening, and there was real value in actually bringing before the full Council on a twice-yearly basis the updated position. At 4.2 is just a reminder of the scale of the budget. So the total budget that's under the Chief Officer's control is the 215 million. That's the combined health and social care developments or elements of that. And all of the work is delivered around the 5 specific local outcomes identified in the strategic plan. That's referred to at 4.4. Just on governance at 4.2, since we last brought this update to Council, we've convened the first meeting of the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. And we did previously have a Clinical and Care Governance group, in other words, an officer-led group. So that's a significant change in bringing that forward as a committee with participation of the voting members on the IGB, and will strengthen our governance considerably as that beds in. At 5.2, we report on progress with integration. So members will be aware that while appropriate council services transferred to the Health and Social Care Partnership in April 2016, there was only a partial equivalent transfer from NHS Forth Valley of services at that time. When we last updated the Council in September, we still had some speed bumps to clear about gathering the pace of change, and we're therefore pleased to report at 5.2 and 5.3 that there has now been good progress made with the approval by the IGB on the 1st of February this year of an agreed approach to the governance and role of the Chief Officer and the proposed integrated management structure. So still lots and lots to do, but a very significant change for this partnership, and one that brings increasing pace of change, and it has to be said, brings us into line with really where we should have been and where other partnerships would be if we benchmark. It's bringing us much closer to where we should be in terms of the development of the governance around integration and the full implementation of the legislation in both the letter and spirit of the legislation. Just at paragraph 5.2.1, we clarify some jargon. So the concept of hosting services refers to a subset of services which, for operational reasons under integration, require to be coordinated on a cross-Forth Valley basis. There's a need for specific agreement on a tripartite rather than bilateral basis. So, in other words, that includes the Stirling Click Manager Health and Social Care Partnership. So there's work ongoing to ensure that we have the necessary governance and agreement in place around those areas of service. The remainder of Section 5 sets out more detail of the proposed integration arrangements. I would draw members' attention to paragraph 5.13, informing you of the report just published in January from the Ministerial Strategic Group for Health and Community Care, which has set out a roadmap with timed tasks for the next stages of integration for all partnerships across Scotland. And I think that's a really important development, because it's a very, very clear and strong statement at the central level, the central government level, that there won't be a tolerance of slowness and tardiness around how we take this forward. That the integration legislation is there, has been there since 2016, and we now need to take that forward in its entirety. So the next sections of the report concern service delivery issues, with a common theme of external scrutiny and intervention. At 5.17, we report on the NHS Forth Valley performance escalation. That's a current development, and that's been a supportive initiative from Scottish Government, working in partnership with NHS Forth Valley around how do we bring about improvement around some key areas. So there was concern around waiting times, and the obvious one is around the emergency department for our time to treatment target. And there has been an escalation process put in place, and that escalation process is leading. So currently we have at the emergency department, we see considerable improvement over the last 3 to 4 weeks. There have been some days where at the emergency department there has been 100% compliance with that 4-hour treatment, a couple of days, so that's been achieved, and that's a really significant achievement for the changes that are happening there, and hopefully a harbinger of sustained improvement over the long term. At 5.21, we update you on the home care inspection. So that we already, in September, informed Council around the disappointing outcome of an earlier inspection in home care. Within the report, we're referring to, in 5.22, a significant programme of improvements. Some of those improvement works couldn't be done overnight. They involved changes to staff working patterns and rotas. We've had really strong engagement and support from staff with some of those changes, and they've only really just gone live, in fact, at the start of this calendar year. So in January we implemented a very different approach to staff rotas, with the support of trade union colleagues and with the staff membership. So again, early days, but we are seeing some significant change in the short term. The point is to make that a long-term sustainable improvement, and I'll come back to some of the relevant points on that in section later on delayed discharge and unscheduled care. 5.24 refers to Somerford House care inspection report. So this members will be aware, and there's been considerable focus on this inspection report, which we received in December, which raised very serious concerns, very worrying concerns about standards of care in one of our care homes in Somerford. So I suppose I wanted to kind of share with Council that we had been aware of difficulties in this care home, and had actually around 3 weeks before this inspection, we had actually added in additional management capacity and were attempting to address the issues, but we still had clearly a long way to go at the point when that inspection happened. The inspection is a positive process for us. We engaged very, very strongly with the inspectors. We implemented immediate changes around the work that was happening there. At 5.29, I kind of again offer reassurance around that. I suppose one of the first things when we receive an inspection report of that kind, which is a highly unusual circumstance, that my first question to the inspector was, is there a wider concern around, all other care homes? And the answer to that was no. And what we clarified at 5.29 is that the inspectorate have been in all of our other care homes and have been confident in the care that we provided there. And to update that, we have in the intervening period worked closely with the inspector, so we are expecting them back in to update their inspection in the current month. So by the end of the current month, we will have that triangulation from them as to some of the improvement we think we have established there. 5.3, moving on to the strategic plan. So again, there's quite a lot of detail there around the strategic plan, but the key point is we're coming to the end of one strategic plan and moving into the next, and we will keep Council informed as to the progress with that. At 5.34, there's some detail there about our engagement with housing. So an example of that is one of the changes that we've made since September has been that the head of housing has joined as a member of the senior leadership team, and that's been been quite an important kind of change for us in the partnership, and there are some key examples of where we're kind of improving outcomes. One of the programs of work we've been involved in for the lifetime of the partnership has been supporting a small group of patients in Lochview Hospital to move out of there into permanent housing, and we have had really tremendous engagement with and support for those people from the housing service, and new top quality housing allocated to those people to actually give them the really best start that they can get in terms of their accommodation needs and moving out of the hospital. 5.37, we detail some of the continuing work on carers implementation. So at 5.39 you can see that we have a new carer strategy, as we're required to do under legislation, just about to be approved by the IGB, would be reported to at the next point when this work is reported back here. And again, to acknowledge that work is done with the Falkirk Carer Centre. There's nothing we would be able to achieve without the contribution that the centre make. At 5.4, we deal with unscheduled care and delayed discharges. So unscheduled care is a kind of an encompassing term for all of that work that happens around what happens when people come to emergency department, what happens to actually support people not to have to go to emergency department, but also what happens when people are ready to leave. So again, significant investment in that whole area. We are now heading into the spring, so each year at the start of the winter there's always the focus, and there's usually anxiety around how will we get through the winter period, the winter planning. So through the winter planning period, just one illustration of that is that we've by and large at any one time not had more than around 3 people waiting for a package of care to kind of go into the home care service, and that's much lower than would have been the case in some previous winters, and again that kind of reflects partnership working. It reflects some investment of funds that we were able to access from Scottish Government monies that were coming through on unscheduled care. So much still to do on delayed discharge, but some kind of solid progress being recorded there. 5.45 is the Forth Valley primary care improvement plan. So again, and then moving on to the out of hours improvement plan. So these areas of work are largely led by colleagues within NHS Forth Valley, but with participation by ourselves. And the pressures that they report are around resourcing their practices. There are issues around recruitment for GPs, and then there's quite a lot of work around developing new roles and new approaches in terms of advanced nurse practitioners, for example, working within practices to try to both improve outcomes but also address that question about recruitment. 5.56, there's some detail there around better delivery on mental health, and just then to pick out at 5.60, page 40, if people are still following me, that we've got quite a lot of work happening on improving transitions planning. So this is an area which I know from experience will come to the attention of elected members on a fairly regular basis, where the transition from young people involved in children's and young people's services moving into adult services has not always been to the standard that we would want to have achieved. And so there's a lot of work has happened in the past year to try to build on previous work, so within that report there's some detail about a simple step that we have taken has been to ring fence funding around currently a community care worker who's focusing on this group of people solely, and actually attempting to get into a much more anticipatory approach, working with young people and their families from not just in the current year but the previous year, and actually where we want to go with the changes signalled there is that we would be working with young people really from quite soon after they move into the secondary school system, so that we're really prepared for when they move from that stage in their education. Living Well Falkirk, 5.69 is the online self-help, self-assessment approach, which is currently live, and there's some data there around the engagement with that. I'm going to hand over to Lynette, as I'd indicated earlier, just to show a little bit about how this works. But I think the key message is that this has to be a fundamental part of the future of how we engage with service users. And some of the figures there around in the first 6 months, over 2,000 people actually going in there and actually having an active session involved in this shows the importance that it has, and because these are really early figures, and I expect those to increase significantly. I'm going to hand over to Lynette.
Just before Lynette starts, we're going to go down there so that we can view it for ourselves, okay?
Okay.
In a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay. And as I say, if people can't hear Lynette, you just need to say, and then we'll do something different. So.
Good morning, everyone. Is it okay for everyone? Can people hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so what I'm showing you here, we've captured some screenshots rather than try to go through this as a live demo, just to make sure we have full control and we're able to show you the most important parts that we'd like you to see. This is the home screen for Living Well Falkirk, the Living Well Falkirk site. This is what people will see when they log into the site, or when they click in from the Falkirk Council site straight into Living Well Falkirk. And you'll see there are a number of bits that look like buttons. In fact,
I'm going to ask you, I'll move that on, and if you can work from the microphone up here, okay? Yeah, that's fine. Just means you'll be sort of facing both directions.
Sorry, yes, okay, so the
I
need to face this.
Is this one here? Yeah, no. Okay, so you need to be here and kind of...
Sorry,
is
that all right for people to hear me? Fine.
Sorry. Excuse me, Joe, can I just suggest that Lynette maybe go to next to the Deputy Provost so she can see the screen and talk at the same time. It gives her a better when she's...
Many thanks. Sorry. This is evidently proving the point about the technology and the microphones. Okay, sorry. The screen you can see just now is the home screen for Living Well Falkirk. You can see a number of parts that look. There's the everyone can improve how they age. Underneath that, there are 4 sets of buttons. When someone is within the screen as a live usage of the screen, these are actually buttons that they can click on. And what I'll do is I'll take you through the selection of these buttons and what they actually show. So this is the first one, moving from the right-hand side across the screen. When someone clicks on Browse General Advice, this is what will come up. And this way that things are ordered in a kind of table format with areas of the home and some personal characteristics such as hearing and memory is what will come up. That's a theme throughout the system. When someone clicks in this area, it opens up further. When someone clicks, one of the areas, it opens up further options for that area. For example, if they were clicking on memory, it brings up a group of daily tasks. And clicking onto one of these, for example, worrying about my safety due to memory, will bring up specific advice. And within that area, as an example, the advice would include getting a fire safety check, annual gas appliance servicing, use of prompt cards as a memory jogger, and telecare. From the home screen, if someone was moving to the left and they were clicking on to the option for the equipment catalogue, it would bring up the same table as I've just shown you, and when they click into an area there, and one of the personal characteristics or the house areas, what it would do then is display a screen like this, and that allows people to see a whole group of, this shows you 18 products of equipment options. And the purpose of that route is where someone has got an idea of an equipment item that they're interested in buying or sourcing, and that allows them then to go in and find that information. The next section along on the home page is our local information and services, and from there you can see that shows, and these are actually the top 4 are direct links to our own Falkirk Council website and partner websites. And that screen also shows, as you can see down the left-hand side, we've still got the same areas and personal characteristics, so the person can click into one of them that's relevant for them, and that will bring up some filtered information about groups, supports and third sector organisations that might be of interest to them based on what they've clicked into. Where a person wants to complete a full self-assessment from the screen, what they would click into is Browse and Start an Assessment. That was one of the options with the picture on it from the home screen. For this, it's necessary to create an account for the option, and the system will store the assessment responses that the person gives. And people at that point are given the terms and conditions, privacy information and whatever as they create their account. So selecting kitchen from that option opens up a menu of options for the person to identify what their difficulty is, and these are a selection of the difficulties. I've taken 2 screenshots of showing the difficulties. So that's the first, and if someone within the area has noted that they want to think about their kitchen and difficulties that they have, these would be the options that they come up with. And the second screen shows the other options. In setting up to do this, I wanted to track through so that I could give an indication of just a bit of an example of what a person would be guided through, and I had selected the one at the bottom, standing long enough to cook or make a meal. That opens up a set of 14 self-assessment questions. And going through these questions, they include things like height, weight, information about person's leg strength, any one-sided weakness, questions about the kitchen environment, and also health questions. This is peppered throughout the system. It continually asks health questions that would trigger the system to say, actually, you need a bit more health advice. That's me. The answers that I gave resulted in the system offering a range of equipment options. And what would happen is it will show equipment options that, because of your assessment route, you are matched to an equipment option. It will give you a number of buy options that a person can click into to self-purchase. But where you're matched to items that Falkirk Council core ADL stock held by GLAS, it will match and show you a loan option, where the person can then click in the loan option, answer some more questions, confirming address, etc. And that, from there, they can actually generate a request straight to our joint loan store for equipment that they're matched to, and they can have that on loan from the joint loan store. That will initiate that delivery process. So that's a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully that gives a bit of a flavour of what the website looks like. Thank you.
There will be an opportunity once Mr McElhone and then the Chief Executive's coming in to ask any questions when that's finished. Thank you. Mr McElhone again.
Okay, so thanks to Lynette for that. And just briefly then to conclude on the report, we have provided you with some information there that implementation of free personal care for adults under the age of 65, so just really to confirm that we're on course with that, and probably since this was written, we've had confirmed position in terms of the allocation of funding, and we're satisfied with the allocation of funding that will come to Falkirk. It's a fair allocation of funding, and we're confident that we will be able to deliver that without coming under any kind of budgetary stress as a consequence, at least in the short term. Obviously, as with free person care for older people, we will monitor the uptake of that and how that changes as it did change in the earlier phase. But for now, we're kind of confident about the budgetary framework we have for the implementation of that policy. And then finally, at 5.8, there's at 580, there's some information on EU exit and preparation for that. So I'm going to hand back to, thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I want to take members back just very briefly to section 5 that deals with progress with integration. Specifically 5.7, which relates to the proposed senior leadership team. And this refers to the two head of service appointments, one of which will be a lead for social work and another a lead for health. And just to advise members in the context of integration that these are both IJB appointments now, and therefore will be taken forward through that body. The second thing I wanted to say, and this is set out at paragraph 5.8, members will note that Joe is actually retiring as head of social work adult services in July of this year. And I thought that, given it's unlikely that Joe will be back at another council meeting between now and then, I want to just take a moment to thank him for the great, I think, integrity and dedication he's brought to the role, his determination to transform and improve services in what have been quite challenging circumstances. I think that's been very much appreciated by colleagues. I'm personally very grateful for his very positive contribution.
Well, I think first of all I'd like to echo those sentiments regarding Joe's retirement. When he told me, I was a bit like, no, don't go. But he's been a tremendous source of advice and support, and the work that he has done to push transformation in adult social care and to help us manage the increasing demand, which I mentioned last time, and to work to develop our services in a different way has been tremendous, and I'd like to see a personal thank you in relation to that. I'm not going to say a lot about the report because it's a very good report. I think I just want to highlight a couple of things. I think it's the very positive news that our progress in integration is moving forward, that we will be developing localities, and those localities will deliver better and more coordinated services for people in those areas. I'd like to acknowledge the significant work in both home care and Somerford in the improvement planning, the significant work that senior managers have done, but also managers on the ground and the staff themselves who have grabbed the bull by the horns and really are at the heart of making changes and making improvements for the people that we provide services for. I'd also like to echo what Joe said about acknowledging the real contribution of Kenny Gillespie, our head of housing. I think we're having some fantastic conversations and activity in what we need to provide for people. Lochview is a great example, but also that wider development in terms of making sure that we can deliver housing, and particularly in relation to our new housing, that's fit for life, that you don't have to move house because you develop a disability or become older, that actually some of the new housing, Graham Place, I don't know if everybody had an opportunity to visit, that the housing was absolutely fantastic and could be converted very, very easily if someone develops a disability. I'd also like to say something about transitions. I think Joe is correct. It's a really, really difficult point for families. The earlier that we work with families, the better. The earlier that we work with young people, the better, because we need to deliver on the aspirations of those young people and put in place the support to make that happen. I would finally like to say I absolutely love the Living Well in Falkirk development. I think it's a fantastic resource, not only for individuals, but I think for us as councillors as well, that we can direct people to that, to help them in their lives, to make connections with their local community, with things that can help them, with equipment that can help them, but also thinking about what is it that can help me improve my health as well. So I think it's a fantastic resource, and I think I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the whole team at the IGIB and in adult social care. They've really been working a huge, there's been a tremendous amount of effort in this past 6 months and beyond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Provost. Just referring to the Home Care Inspection Report, paragraphs 5.21 and 5.22. And I note that there have been changes to the system made in January with a view to, quote, improving staff working patterns, rotas, increased staff availability, redesign to better align staff resources to localities, and the other one I'm thinking about is the improvement of continuity. Can I just give you an example from the viewpoint of one of the recipients of this service? I happen to be visiting as part of my role as his district elder, a member of our church. It's an elderly gentleman who's got multiple medical problems, but is basically paralysed and is in a wheelchair. Now, he receives care from 2 individuals 4 times a day. Now, I happened to visit him before I actually looked at this report, so it's rather serendipitous that this has come up, because I was just asking how things were, and he was telling me that the system had changed. And he said, how many different carers do you think I get in a week? And I had a quick calculation, and I said, well, let's say they're all going to be in different shifts. So I said, maybe say 8 different ones in a week. And he said, well, Nigel, I'll tell you. He said, I kept a diary in January when the system changed. And over a 3-day period, I had 17 different carers. So it does seem to me that the continuity is still not there. And I know from reading in the press that this is one of the things, one of the major criticisms of those who are receiving home care, that there isn't that continuity. So obviously there's a little bit of work to be done there. And the other issue that you said, and this may be something you could take back, the aligning of staff resources to localities. One of the comments that this gentleman made was that the carers seem to come from all over Falkirk. He says he knows of carers who live in his area. He happens to live in Carrinshoe. But he's finding carers from all over town. He said they must be spending hours going all over the town, going to different localities. So maybe something to think about when scheduling the carers. Try and get them closer to home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Mr McElhone, for your report, and thank Patricia Cassidy for obviously orchestrating it. Just a couple of points. Obviously, myself and Councillor Harris have not communicated with each other on this subject. I've got continuity down here as well. The last time we spoke there was a big concern about the sickness in the caring system, whereas there were so many carers can't go out, so they weren't getting their usual carers, and there was an awful lot of concern in our communities about that. You were talking the last time, Joe, about addressing it, having start back talks with them when they call sick, etc., to see where the problem lies. But where the rotors are changing, I was wondering if that would maybe help the situation with that. The second point we spoke about, which is not in the report either, was I raised the question, Councillor Coy helped me with it, with the shortage of GPs and the problems of recruiting GPs. A lot of the constituents were concerned about telling the administration staff what was wrong with them, because they were now doing their triage to try and get them to the right department. Has that been a success? Has that had many complaints, etc.? That's all my concerns. Thanks, Provost.
Before we bring in Councillor Black and give Mr McElhone an opportunity to come in and maybe answer the concerns of both Councillor Harris and Councillor Grant. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so on continuity of care, we're on an improvement trajectory for that. Obviously, the individual case Councillor Harris referred to, if I have the name, I can sort of check and see if there's anything we can do to improve that specifically. In January, because we implemented a new system, so there will in fact have been turbulence within the system, because we were moving from one set of rotas to a completely new set of rotas. So there will, and I don't know if that's the reason for the 17 and the 3, but we will. Our staff had to take existing rotas and actually dismantle those and implement a new rota. So there's a change management dimension of that, and we do try to communicate, and our staff are communicate with the public and service users on that. We are able, from the technology that we've implemented over the last couple of years, to measure not just the numbers of people who are in any one house, which we want to keep as low as we possibly can, but we're able to measure how much time out of a group of 12 or 15 or more carers, how much time do they actually spend in the house, if I can try to explain. So we can demonstrate that a person has had 80% of their care delivered over a 4-week period by 6 people, and then 90% by 9 people, and then the actual numbers, the total numbers of people who will go into a house will increase from there, in reflection of sickness, absence, holidays, So people will see significant numbers of people in their house, but what we're really aiming to do is to make sure that most of their care is delivered by a smaller core group of people, and we're trying to improve on both of those things, to increase the amount of care delivered by the core group and to minimise as far as possible the single shift that's been covered by one person who's having to go in to cover an unexpected absence, a sickness absence. On sickness absence, Councillor Grant's question, we have in fact delivered significant improvement in the current year. So we compare month on month. So in this January period that we've just had, our sickness, absence and home care had fallen really very significantly compared with the previous year. And some of the steps that we had taken to do that were that we spoke with every single member of staff back in September and October. We brought every member of staff into a small group conversation to explain the impact of absence, to explain that actually this is where high numbers of people going through someone's house comes from. And then we also did a lot of work around some existing practice where people who were off sick and sometimes going into longer term sickness absence, there was a previous expectation that the person had to come back fully fit to do every aspect of the job. In fact, we recognised that that's not necessary. People can come back, can be ready to come to work. They don't need to do every aspect of the job, and we can protect their well-being and their health, returning to job with restricted duties. So those are changes that we have made. On Councillor Grant's question around triage and the GP practices, my understanding from colleagues who are leading this in NHS is that there has been a fair amount of engagement with populations. I think particularly the focus here was in Grangemouth, actually, that there was feedback around some of the issues that people were having around trying to feel building confidence really in the new way of delivering GP practices. But my understanding from health colleagues is that they have some reassurance from their engagement with the wider public and and through meetings that they're having with the wider public that it's settling in and that people are beginning to see some benefit and perhaps even improvement. But, yeah.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to also say thank you to Mr Markleholm. He has been a breath of fresh air over the last couple of years, and his knowledge and expertise has proven invaluable to the Council. I also think it's a shame that he's going now, he's retiring now, because actually some of that hard work that he's done over the last couple of years is starting to pay off, and we're seeing the benefits for people in our communities, our service users. It's good to see that at long last services are being integrated. It's taken a lot of effort, goodwill and patience to get to this point, and I'd like to thank all our staff for their hard work. It's been incredibly difficult, much more difficult I think than anyone would ever have imagined, to bring the two organisations with their different cultures, procedures and governance systems together, but we're now starting on a positive journey and I'm looking forward to the future with that. I have a couple of questions, Provost. I'm glad to see that positive transitions remain a top priority, and the Labour group has been concerned about the lack of progress in this area in the past. The appointment of a transitions coordinator will help ensure that the young people leaving school in the next few years will have a better chance of an organised placement that suits their needs. But I'd just like to ask the questions: how are we going to ensure that there are appropriate placements and provision going forward, and how will we enable parents to continue to work once their youngsters have left school? I still hear of parents who are struggling because they can't get the resources they need to live the life they had when their child was at school. It's a very stressful time for parents and carers when their youngsters leave school, and I'm not convinced as yet that we have the resources. I think we've got the will there and we've got the ability, but we just maybe didn't have the resources yet to ensure that the support is there for everyone that needs it. If the supports, placements and respite, etc. aren't in place, then very quickly stress levels can go up and people can lose faith in the system. We need to get it right, and we need to get it right first time round. So I look forward to seeing the future work that's happening in that area.
And in terms of ensuring that there are options and choices, one of the most important things that we've done has been to redesign younger adults' day services over the last couple of years, and I think it's only as we move into the next 3 to 5 year programme or planning period that we will see the impact of that in terms of transitions, because what there was previous experience of young people leaving school and saying that they didn't want to attend council day services because the model was so traditional. Out of 170 people who were using the service when we did our quality impact assessment, poverty impact assessment, when we started that redesign programme, out of 170 there were 5 people under the age of 25. So that told us something really significant about how attuned the service was to the needs of young people coming through. They wanted something different. But what we now have is within that service enormous flexibility to actually design our supports around what people want in terms of their outcomes, and clearly this fits with the wider development of self-directed support. It's embedded in self-directed support. And in terms of respite, yes, I recognise that short breaks need to be in place. Again, that will most definitely be a continued part of what the council provides. That will be there as a core offer to people to enable families to get and carers to get those breaks.
Councillor Falkirk, Councillor Aitchison, Councillor Bowley and Councillor Reid.
I'd just like to say as well that I'd be sorry to see Joe leave. He's been very, very helpful to me over the past while. Just a couple of other things. The out-of-hours care, I've had to contact them myself before on behalf of a constituent, and they reacted very quickly, and they got back to me quite quickly as well to tell me that they'd made moves to try and help the person out, which was pretty good. So that was really good. Just on the Living Well Falkirk, I think it's very, very good. Is it possible we could possibly get something like touch screens on the wall in the hubs and libraries and things for people to access that? You can get the arms that somebody in a wheelchair can just pull the screen down a bit and things. Adjustable arms, something that might be helpful for some people.
Yeah, in terms of the technology and touchscreens, I don't know, Lynette, maybe that's a specific technology question, but the key point there is about availability in the hubs and availability in the libraries, and the library staff have all had training in this resource, and we've worked very closely with the Community Trust on this, and they're very, very keen to see it as just one of the things that a good librarian can actually offer to people coming in looking for support. And I do think that it's really right at the beginning, and I can see this being made available. We talk all the time about people waiting for 4 hours at emergency department, getting frustrated, and those are key people who need this kind of help, and I do believe that as time goes on, we're only a short step away from being able to make this kind of technology available to people in places where they are waiting for services, but also places where they proactively go themselves to look for support in libraries. And I think the key, there is a really important message in there, is that there are many people out there who don't want who don't see themselves as a service user of a social work service and don't want to become part of a social work service. They're anxious about that. They think that it's the first step towards living their life in a care home, and they will tell their families, no, I don't want that referral done. But what this does is it gives people any number of other ways. It's there on their mobile phones, and lots of those 2,000 sessions that have been started, some of them have been started because we can track from the technology in the south of England, in Wales, and elsewhere. People's families are doing that for their relative living in Falkirk. So we've really increased the accessibility of this kind of information, but it does need to go much further than we are at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aitchison.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for your report today. Taking up on Councillor Harris's point, I think I've mentioned here before that there has been in the past updates and carers coming into my house over a 3-day period. I must say, since the new system came in place, I think it was 28th January, things have improved greatly. However, I must say it's very much familiar to service was provided up to 2-3 years ago. So we may have redesigned it, but I don't think we've reinvented the wheel. I think we've actually listened to what service users wanted and carers wanted, and I think we've actually just went back to what we had a few years ago. But I think that's what people were wanting. On the point of transition, I welcome Fiona's point saying that we should start transitions as early as possible. I would say probably a minimum of age 14. Having done many transitions before for people leaving school, going to adult services, it's a very daunting time for the service user, pupil. It's a very daunting time for their families. I'm not so sure there is a lot of positive destinations out there for people. Some people still like the familiar day services, some people perhaps not. But I think in a few years' time you may want to look at opening day services again, and that's my personal opinion. But I would start transition periods as early as possible, and I'm not overly convinced one transition worker will be enough. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for your input, sir. Councillor Goldie, then Councillor Reid and Councillor Coombs. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. And since I came here in 1980, I've seen a great number of officers come and go, and all with varying degrees of abilities and the amount of effort that they put in. But I would like to make special thanks to Mr Michael Hone, because I'm delighted, first of all, that he's gave notice that he's going to leave, because in some other organisations that are close to my heart, people just got up and left and caused an awful concern just very recently. But I would like to say this about Joe Michael Hone. Joe never dodged a question. And I know it's difficult for officers, and it's not a side swipe at anybody, but there is nothing more infuriating than councillors sitting here and officers saying, I haven't got the answer. I know officers can't always have the answer, but it's becoming more and more of a trend. Oh, I haven't got the answer for that, or I haven't got the paperwork. In Joe's case, Joe always gave an answer and then added, if you need further information, or I need to get further information, then I'll do that. And as I say, it's not a side swipe at any other officers, but it's something that I greatly appreciated. Joe got the job, and it must be the most thankless task in any local authority now, the position that Joe had. He's done very well in it, he's gave it every effort, and I would just simply like to wish him all the best for going forward, and I hope you have every success in your future.
Thank you again, sir. Councillor Reid.
Yes, I think I'd like to echo the comments of Councillor Goldie. What distinguishes a good officer, particularly in the field of social work, is they serve not just with their head but with their heart, and I think Joe's heart has always been in this area of work. So we wish you well for the future, Joe. It was nice to see a role reversal as well with the slides on the project. Could members have details of that we could distribute to anybody that's on our Facebook, or I think that would be handy to disseminate that information as widely as possible. Transitions coordinator, yes, very welcome. Do we have a name? Can we give a name?
So we currently have a community care worker, Fiona Douglas. Yeah, so she is actually taking us through a transition, really, to when we get the model fully established. So Fiona Douglas is actually currently working with all the young people currently leaving school, not doing all of the work. They'll have their own allocated workers, many of them, but she is coordinating the work, and that's the model which we then want to, because we want to take that forward. Not just that's a social work post. We want to take it forward as an integrated post that combines a perspective from health and education and social work and housing. Yeah.
It's quite alarming to hear the reports on the NHS Forth Valley, albeit that our workforce is in attending to it, and it makes one wonder how it was allowed to deteriorate to that extent. I think we all have anecdotes that we can quote about the shortages at Forth Valley. A friend of mine, for example, who was due to attend with a consultant, had to spend 2 weeks in Glasgow because the consultant had resigned. And I'm sure there are anecdotes For example, paediatricians is complaining about the shortage in that particular field. And it's not that money's not being pumped into the NHS. It is, as instance, the last Scottish Government budget, a considerable amount of money was put into it. So I just wonder if they're as carefully audited as we are in terms of expenditure.
Sorry,
You're retiring, Joe. Just say it.
Yeah.
Just say it.
Well, I think colleagues in the acute sector would say that they're very closely scrutinised, and in fact they would claim to be on a very, very tight leash from the minister down, actually. So I think there's a fair amount of scrutiny, and I think the challenge really is that the solution can't come out of the acute hospital. So the solution will be when there is the medium and long-term investment and reinvestment into primary care in the community and community health, and so a community health model which matches up and with our locality model and integrated locality, and we can then see the hospital begin, the acute hospital begin to function well, and as I say, there has been a really important change in the last few weeks of emergency departments showing that it is possible for people to go there and actually meet that 4-hour target. So there has to be the learning from that as to what have we done that's different there, because it's been a very long time since that kind of target has been met in the local emergency department.
Oh, it's me.
It was me first.
Oh, was it? Carry on.
Just because you're important now.
Councillor Coombs.
I did have my
Could you put your light off, Councillor Bissett? Could you put your light off, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. Obviously, like everybody else, I'll be very sad to see Joe go, even though I think you should have taken your chance there, Joe. But I'd just like to pick up on the issue of, it's a very good report and it's very full, but one of the issues is about the prevention rather than cure. And I would like to highlight the opportunity for members and staff to get some fresh air and exercise. I was out yesterday at the Active Travel Hub, and I was glad and I was sad. I was glad I got a personal trainer because nobody else turned up, but I was sad that nobody else turned up. So whilst I was walking and talking with the young lady, I can't remember her name, I'm afraid, we did discuss exactly this, the fact that we should have more joined up thinking, and all the public sector bodies, instead of saying, well, I'm NHS and this is my budget, I'm the council and this is my budget, I'm the trust and this is my budget. It's time that we all did start to do that, and we've had these debates at the trust. I'm glad, as Joe says, that the trust are taking part and helping excuse me, to put these programmes in place. But as councillors, we know that there are these limited resources and the cuts that are coming down the line. You can't measure or quantify or justify a preventative measure. We're saying that we have to have the times at hospitals, but nobody's saying you have to have X amount of people signing up for your gym classes. And I stand here obviously very guilty that the reason I went out yesterday is the excesses of the New Year and Christmas. We're all sedentary lives, and it's easy not to take care of your health until something does go wrong. So I'm going to just make a pitch. The 19th of March, the Active Travel Hub will be back outside, and instead of walking, they're bringing along electric bikes. So everybody's welcome to come and join in, or just have a laugh at me falling off my bike.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bissett now, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to also echo what's been said about Mr McElholm. I've found him to be an excellent officer, and he's been very helpful. And having worked in the NHS, I know the challenges you must face trying to get through their very complex structures to integrate with IGB. And I would just like to wish him well for the future, and we've still got one issue to discuss, so maybe catch up with you about that. Just on Summerford, when is the next inspection due, and do you anticipate that it will be a successful report? And also, I'd just like to ask about, given the changes to daycare in Oswald Avenue in Dundas, how are they settling down? And could the portfolio holder guarantee that now the moves have taken place, there are no more changes planned, as staff and clients need to be able to get used to their new environment and build new relationships? So I'd just like a wee comment on Dundas and Oswald Avenue daycare, if it's settling down and how things are going. Thank you.
Maybe if I take Summerford and then some of the feedback from service users. So on Summerford, the inspectors have been, they've had monitoring visits which are short of the full re-inspection, but they've given us feedback from those monitoring visits. One of those was last week, and they are, very, very positive, and we're happy for us to kind of share that information. That they've got very, very positive feedback around the change and recovery programme that has been put in place, and they will have a formal re-inspection. It's within this month. They don't give us a date for obvious reasons, but we will have that feedback by the end of March, and I do anticipate that will show significant improvement in terms of the gradings. And then in terms of the changes around day services, so we've had really very, very positive feedback around the changes that we've made. There are many, many examples, which obviously I can't go into the specific detail, but because it would maybe identify people, because a lot of people will be known, quite well in terms of having a profile within the community. But there are many people who, during the consultation, were very, very anxious about this, who are now saying, yeah, we completely understand why this change had to happen, and so both families and service users are telling us that in some cases their lives have been transformed. So people who were attending a building, for maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and seeing the same group of people, perhaps in some cases for 20 years, that they are still being supported, but they're actually out in the community meeting completely different people and involved in different different events. So the chief executive on familiarisation visit, joined us at an art class, where there were young people there who had been previously attending the day centre, who were just engaged alongside other members of the public with an art teacher, and were really, really. It was very moving, really, to kind of hear their kind of view about how much they enjoyed what they were doing, and it wasn't to in any way kind of rubbish the past. The things are of their time, but change needs to come and change needs to happen, and people were definitely saying that they've got a different and better experience. In terms of kind of more concrete measures around complaint process, I'm not aware of any complaint, so it might be that, yeah, there are some folk who are not as happy about that. That will be in a group of people. There will be a range of perspectives, but I'm not aware of any complaint. I don't have any outstanding complaints. I'm able to say that, about people feeling dissatisfied about the outcome in terms of, primarily it was the big group of people were the people who moved from the Bainsford building, and many of them out into being supported in the community, but some of them to Oswald Avenue or Dundas, and so.
Okay, I think we'll bring in. We'll hold that just to respond to.
Yeah, I think what I want to say is that changes to day services are about a process of continual engagement with people who use services and families, and that is something that will go on probably forever, because we're talking about transitions. What do people who are leaving school what is it that they want. That doesn't mean that there's not still a model within traditional day service. We know Oswald Avenue and Dundas provide really, really important services. But I think the most important thing is that we engage with families and people who use services all the way along to look at what needs to be developed in the future as well. So I think change isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's about that change, and any change has to be informed by people who use the service and their families. And I think that's just what I want to be clear about, because I can't tell you what the future will look like. And one, it's not the other part of it is it's not a decision for me. It's a decision for any decision would be made at the IGIB, but any decision, any activity must be informed by the people who use the services and their families. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I just want to be clear about what any process for what we're trying to do and what the services are trying to do with people are informed by. And that continual engagement it's an ongoing process. It's not something that stopped when people moved from Bainsford. It didn't stop. It's an ongoing process.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Meikle-John, followed by Councillor Hughes and Councillor Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I know that Joe's getting many plaudits, but he's still got a wee while to go. We're not quite letting him off the hook yet. But just acknowledge, obviously, that there has been an amazing amount of work done, particularly around the integration and some very difficult tasks that he's taken on board and has started to make that journey into a new way of working and our transitions for health and social care. And talking, there was a couple of comments there from colleagues across the other side around the engagement with our colleagues in health, and I know that Joe was being very careful about he was able to put that, and from an officer perspective that's appropriate. However, from a political perspective, I do know that there is a lot of work going on within the integration health and social care agenda and going forward, and I think the next 6 months there could be a bit of a bumpy ride in order to actually be able to make the change that's needed to be taken forward. Minister's very clear about getting that transfer of resources from the acute section into the social care area, and a lot of that is around public health and the prevention agenda. And we have to be quite bold, I think, in being able to say that in order to make that difference, we need to invest in the prevention aspect of it, and that is something from the point of view of the IGIB is we can have a real influence on, but we need to say that resource has to be put in there in order to get the better outcomes. Diabetes is the one in particular. We're spending massive amount of money in treating diabetes when we really need to look at doing the prevention aspects to it. So I think that comes through loud and clear from colleagues within the IGIB, and it's something that we'll continue to push as far as we possibly can, certainly within Falkirk. But I also think through the IGIB we're in a much better position now in our relationship with health and being able to call them to account in some of the areas, but also say that we can actually be an influencer and help change some of those things if we can be at the table, if we can actually be involved in some of those discussions around the delayed discharges, around the A&E, and what we can actually do from the social side and actually making that difference. Talking about the GP recruitment and the difficulties, again, that's recognised, and there's a lot of work going on even within the health service. GPs, as people will know, tend to be self-employed, as do their practices. But by taking GPs into the health service and having that as part of a doctor's rotation to do that GP, but being paid by the health service, funded by the health service, then perhaps that can free up some of the resources there. But we're moving to a different way of working, and not everybody needs to see a GP. We have a number of very capable allied health professionals, practitioner nurses, advanced paramedics, that can all actually do some of that prescribing, that socials prescribing. So it doesn't always necessarily mean you have to be able to see a GP. And that's an educational aspect that we have to do within our own communities. And I appreciate what was being said about that triage at that front door. But the job of that particular receptionist has changed over the years, and they're there to be able to try and direct you to speak to the right health professional that is being able to get you the help the quickest, rather than always going to a GP at the first point of call. That's not perfect, and I know that from my own experience and the experiences of others, but it is the direction of travel. So there's a lot in there, and the lines between health and social care are becoming more and more blurred, as they should be, and our service users, people that need that assistance, that help at the front line, shouldn't have to be able to delineate between each, and that's what we would want. Home care service locality teams are being set up to do exactly the type of thing that Nigel and David Grant has been talking about, is to limit the number of people that are going in through the doors, being able to build up a relationship, and making best use of our staff. We're also looking to upskill our staff to make them more flexible in that respect, and I think that's a great opportunity in professionalising the role of a carer, because I think often that it's not necessarily seen as a professional role, but I think we should be encouraging that development and supporting our staff to be encouraged to take on the necessary training and develop their skills, because it is an area that is going to grow as we go forward. I think there's a lot of positives in this. I think the Living Well website, and I put my hands up and say that people were sceptical when I said let's do the wee presentation, but I think that was useful. That members don't always have time to come to specialist seminars, but I think there's an opportunity here for that very short presentation that I think people will be able to find useful to take back into their communities, even their own families. But it doesn't negate the assessment process through our social care service. It directs people to where they can get low-level help, but if they need more intense assistance, that is still available to them, but it will be more targeted, and hopefully that means that people will be able to get a response much quicker. I think at that point, I know that others are wanting to come in, that there isn't an amendment to this, but it's important that people have the opportunity to be able to make comment on this, and I think that the introduction of these reports has been really very welcome, and I would ask that to be taken back to Patricia and on all of the staff, as well as yourself, Joe.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to wish Joe all the best in his retirement, but also to say that you will be missed. I also wanted to offer a note of positivity today, in that when looking at 5.36 housing contribution in relation to wheelchair accessible housing, this whole section is in one respect, it's about partnership working, it's about collaboration, and it's about working together. And just to mention, in our Strategic Housing Investment Plan of 2019-2020, 23-24, which was passed at the Executive on the 16th of October 2018, it was highlighted that an all-10-year need for between 300 and 510 wheelchair accessible properties was required. The evidence for this came from Falkirk Council's HNDA, Housing Need Demand Assessment. Also planned to be built for varying need standards, 504 older and ambulant properties, also 132 accessible properties. In the local housing strategy, the target is 5 to 10% wheelchair accessible for new build properties. But can I just draw your attention to two practical examples of all of the distillation of the discussions within, obviously, the HCS and all the different organisations working together. I visited a Shield Gardens in Langleys, which was 8 two-bedroom flats which were built. I also visited, and thank you to Councillor Colley for mentioning Graham Place. I visited Graham Place in Denny, where we have completed 19 properties. These are 12 two-bedroom, 4 in a block, and 7 three-bedroom houses. All the properties I visited are wheelchair accessible on the ground floor. In the 4 in the block properties in Graham Place, level access showers were installed. All of our new council properties I visited were finished to a high standard internally and externally. The design of the properties allows maximum mobility within an open plan combined kitchen and living room area. I would describe all of our new properties as offering, and I use the phrase, flexible adaptability. I'm sure that everyone would agree that these houses are fabulous and are also an example of what can be achieved through partnership working. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, sir. Now going to Councillor Kerr. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. Come back to page 35, para 25 on the Summerford House. Can I ask Mr McElhone, on 5.24 it says the report came out on January 7. I've been trying to look at the report, but I can't find out where to get it, Joe. I thought when it highlighted in blue, I thought I could just click on that and it came up, but it hasn't. Can you send me the report, please? And when he says that at the end of the month, or by the end of the month, the care inspector will come out, can we see the report that the care inspector came back with, if possible?
Okay, happy with that?
Yes,
get that information out?
Yes,
also on page 39, Provost, para 5.56, Programme for Government Delivery Plan, Better Mental Health in Scotland, which is great, as we all understand that this is an important issue in our society today and going forward. The report says it's a 10-year plan, to which we had just started in December 2018, so it's in its early stages. Can we get a report either annually or biannually to see how we are doing with it? We're saying we're going to employ 80 nurses, allied health professionals, psychologists. It maybe no happen right away, but if we know in the years to come that where we are with it.
Okay, so I can certainly, take back to the Chief Officer a specific request that this is highlighted in the twice yearly report, so that because this is part of a rolling programme of reports, and so we can ensure that that is foregrounded in the report, that request. Yeah.
I'll be extremely brief, Provost. I'd just like to associate myself with comments with regards to Joe. They say, Joe, that you should leave a stressful situation or a stressful position while your hairline's still intact and while your hair's the same colour as it was when you joined. As you see, very few of us took that advice. But I wish you all the best with whatever you can undertake. As you're aware, Joe, if any of the members of this chamber were rather sceptical of the proposals to change daycare, it was me. I spoke to you on a number of occasions because I had seen the good part of daycare for many years when I was a support worker with Key Housing Association, and I was afraid that we would lose that balance. I'm delighted to say I was wrong, and I've got to admit that the concerns I had proved to be unjustified. I hope by expressing them in the first place that played a part in rounding up the report, but that's for another day. Just like to thank you for the work you've done on behalf of that particular group, that client group. It's much appreciated. All the feedback has been, as you have said, absolutely excellent. and I'm delighted to follow that.
Okay, thank you for your input, Sir. Councillor McCluskey.
Thanks, Provost. I also like to congratulate Joe, and if you do think we went on a bit, we're only trying to make up for your lengthy presentation, so that was just trying to get our aim back, but you've been a very good and honest officer, and we'll think of all day. Certain words have been said here today. You know, always when you get reports, you get these words coming in. Partnership is one. Best partnership I ever felt was the partnership between a user, one of the vulnerable people out there, and a carer. We've heard like 17 people, and I'm taking it there could be worse out there, 17 different carers. What happened is that carer can be the only visitor or the only friend that person gets, and a bond develops. That's a partnership. And if you get a regular carer, they see if there's a decline in that user, and they can go back to the obviously line management. Always get members when we deal with people to ken, they can go back to the line management and say their health's declining and they need an extra care package, and that gets looked into. So it always gives members that comfort. But when you hear these stories, so many different people going in the door, how can they possibly know what care package is right, how that person is, and that? So that's a concern. So as I say, I hope it's something that we can certainly work on. We hear the day, we're always interested in people's health and well-being, and we see that wonderful presentation. You press a button there and that computer there is going to tell you, you know, and put you all right and improve the quality of your life. Wonderful tool. What about the people that can't use a computer or didn't hear a computer? Brought up one of the members who put it in a library. Even in my villages, didn't hear library, didn't hear community centre. Where do they go if they've not got a computer? I can't use a computer. These are vulnerable people. So that's like having this new wonder drug that can put 10 years onto your life, but we're not going to give you it. It's no good to you. That wonderful tool is no good to you unless you've got it or you've got access to it. That's the reality. And I do see what's happening in health. I'm 64. I never waited 2 days in my life to see a doctor in 64 years of man. You always got a doctor next day or the following day, no problem at all. Suddenly, this last month, everybody's having to wait a week and 10 days. Now, I ken that's normal everywhere else. It's not normal in Slavanan, but we just see that there is things changing, but it just seems to be changing in the wrong direction. I like to see things going the best way. So as I say, it's very few words, but as I say, there's an awfully complicated system, and obviously Joe's tried his best to try to get some balances. There's a lot of good things in there, but I do believe that there's a lot of work still to be done.
Okay, thank you. Before I close this, is there anybody else like to come in? I think it's been a very frank and open discussion. Councillor Murtagh.
I was going to try and attempt it, but I think I might just do it quite while I'm ahead. I would like to say that there has been some really good evidence of partnership working as well, and I know that Councillor Kimms was bringing up about the Active Travel Hub, and Ray Orshey and the team down there are fantastic at working with many partner organisations, including Forth Valley Health Board and the cycle buses that they've been running. But also, as I understand it, one of the things that I found really heartening are some of the stories of our own Falkirk Council staff who have integrated with the needs of others in identifying people who could go on electric bikes, training people how to ride, training people how to get active in their community, and that is coming through both through routes from councillors and through referrals as well. And I think that there's a lot of joint working going on that we don't see in those partnerships. And the work in our officers, and it was mentioned before, I'd echo the words of members in the chamber about the work that Joe has put in, but other excellent officers who really put their heart and soul into trying to get people active again. And it's fantastic to see. I just like to put that on record that I think that there is, although there's always more work that can be done, there's great examples of partnership working going on and getting people back into mobility through social prescribing, and that from what I can see from the Living Well, the constituents have contacted me that actually, as you say, their family members are the ones who've put them into it. It's actually the fact that they can explain it and talk it through as well is having a great benefit. I've been on it myself this morning and navigating through it and seeing some of the great benefits to it. So I think definitely a great thanks to yourself, but to the staff and to the team that are leading that and taking the ethos forward, as well as the practical measures as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just before I conclude, I have just a couple of points myself that were brought up. First of all, the leader has brought up the issue about diabetes. There's millions of people out there that are diabetic, they don't know about it. It's coming to epidemic proportions. And if you haven't been tested for diabetes, then I would advise you to go. One of the issues as well is that Councillor Kerr brought up an issue that is really dear to my heart, the term is the Programme for Government Delivery Plans, Better Mental Health in Scotland. Now, we should not underestimate this tragedy that's out there, because there was a documentary on the TV which showed quite clearly at such an early age the effects that people have and the mental health issues there. So I'm pleased that it was brought up and that there is extra funding. I think what has been stated is that there's 80 people that are going to be employed, but I think that's going to be rolled out across Scotland. I don't think it's just for the Falkirk area. Yeah. So that is a major area. Just going to finish off and maybe deviating a wee bit from this report, which is so full, is the fact is that the NHS is always under considerable attack in many areas. Their targets, their waiting times and cancellation of operations, we've all been there. But can I say this, personally speaking, I've been, in the past few months, have been over to Forth Valley Hospital, and can I say this, the staff in that hospital are absolutely superb. We hear about the problems, the bureaucracy, but the fact is that at the cold face, the people that work there are absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Agreed with the report? Thank you very much. And can I say this on behalf of everybody, Mr McElhone, because this may be the last report, because I believe you're leaving in July. I think we all wish you sincerely the best of luck in the future, and I think he's due a round of applause before he goes. Thank you. Your agenda this morning, Local Governance Scotland Act 2004, Remuneration Amendment Regulations 2019. It's pages 46 to 50. Mr Moody.
Thank you, Provost. And yes, as you know, this is the report which will deal with councillors' remuneration. And as the report notes, this is uprated each year in accordance with the percentage increase in the median annual earnings of public sector workers in Scotland, which this year has produced a figure of 2.8%. That applies automatically by operation of the regulations to 2 of the 4 categories of councillors. So that is to the leader of the council and to councillors who are not the civic head or senior councillors. So the only decision, Provost, that the council is asked to make in this report is in relation to the civic head and in relation to senior councillors. And the report provides for you the figures which would be the outcome if the 2.8% increase was applied uniformly to the senior councillors and also to your position, Provost, as civic head. The information, I think, is fully set out within the report, but I'm happy to take any questions if any member has a question.
Sorry, I'll bring in the meeting. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi, that's okay. Thank you, Provost. This is always a challenge to come to Council to look at awarding ourselves a pay increase. But I think we need to reflect on the work that every councillor does within their ward and the responsibilities that they take on. And the salary isn't a dreadfully high salary for an elected position, but it is one that is obviously under significant scrutiny, particularly by the public. The perception of what a councillor does and what they get is often not quite the same. However, every member in here will have bills to pay, and we have over the years taken a lower increase than is proposed today, and obviously a pay freeze in the past. and I think it's only quite right that members do receive an uplift, and the uplift that's proposed is as per the papers promised. And I have a motion just to circulate, just to reflect that, is agreed to item 1, the terms of the Local Government's Review and Remuneration Act, and note the increase to the level of members' remuneration paid to councillors and laid out in accordance with the regulations, and agrees to the increase the level of remuneration paid to the provost and senior councillors by 2.8%, consistent with the increase applied to councillors and the council leader.
Happy to second the right.
We'll distribute it first.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll bring in Councillor.
Okay, we'll bring in Councillor Nicholl now, and then Councillor Coombs. Thank you.
Thank you, really, to be a beneficiary of this, just being a standard councillor. Councillor Reid spoke earlier about everybody getting the rate for the job, and I was certainly here when Councillor Reid, as provost, took a lesser payment for fulfilling the roles of provost, and obviously at the time that was his decision. However, provost, I don't think that decision should have bound future provosts who may have different circumstances. And on the maxim that everybody is due the rate for the job, I have no problem with the amendment, or the motion rather, put forward by the leader. However, I think in regarding to your own salary, it should be the going rate, which would be the £26,208 that's mentioned in the report. And I would certainly hope that the leader of the council would accept that. But if not, then I would move to a formal motion on that regard. I've got a pounding headache here, so that's all I want to say at this time.
Thanks, Provost. I'm not discussing our allowances. The point I was looking to make was about the position of the valuation board. I think, irrespective of who's in power or who takes the seat, my personal view of this valuation board is that as a historical body, it's a product of its time, and personally I think it's a waste of time and money. And I think that it makes me wonder, given all the savings or cuts that we're having to make, is Holyrood looking at any of these things to look to save money? Because as far as I can see, that's at least £40,000 that could be saved from the public purse, as well as all the expenses that are claimed. And sorry, that's £40,000 for Falkirk, plus Clacks, plus Stirling. I think this board is a tick box exercise, and that the central scrutiny should be done by central government.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to come into the debate? We've got a motion moved and seconded.
I would like to say, Provost, I don't know if Councillor Nicholl moved the amendment, I'm sure he did, but like others in the chamber, I have been a Provost previously, but I've also been a trade unionist and still continue to be a trade unionist. And if there's a rate for the job, as Councillor Miko John alluded to, if there's a rate for the job, then the person should be paid the rate for the job. Of course, if a person finds himself in a financial circumstance that he or she says, I don't need the cash or I don't want to take the cash, that's fair enough. But until a person does that, they should be paid the rate for the job, and that's the rate that's there. And if Councillor Nicholl needs a seconder, I would second that.
I was hoping for us that the leader of the council, it always seems a bit unseemly for councillors to argy-bargy, nobody comes out very well out of it. I was just hoping that the leader of the council would accept that, but if not, then I reserve the right to move an amendment.
Provost, with your indulgence, obviously it's the first I've been aware of this. It would be helpful if we could maybe have 10 minutes just to consult with my group rather than make an arbitrary decision.
Perfect. 10 minutes. Okay. Please say thank you, everybody. Okay, members, we'll reconvene and members take their seat. Fine. Okay, thank you. Go back to Councillor Miko.
Thank you, Provost. It has been recognised that yes, there's a rate for the post of Provost, and that the previous two incumbents, Councillor Reid and our past President, Councillor Coleman, also chose to take the lower remuneration. But that is obviously a reflection of an individual's choice, and that would be entirely for any further individual like yourself to be able to make. Therefore, in recognition that the rate for the job, then I'm happy to accept that as an addendum.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Everybody agreed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader of the Federation.
Takes us to item 9. It's appointments. It's pages 51 to 55. Somebody? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And as the report notes, this lists a series of appointments which the Council is asked to make today to a number of vacancies caused for a variety of reasons. There will be an opportunity to make those appointments as I think we go through these one by one, Provost. I think the comments I would make just in advance of that is just to remind the Council in relation to the appointment of the convenership of the executives that there is a general agreement among the political groups to share convenerships between firstly the executives and secondly the two scrutiny committees. So depending on the outcome of the appointment to the executives, there may then be a consequential vacancy for one of the convenerships of the scrutiny committees, but we can deal with that issue if it arises. The only other point I think I would make at this stage, Provost, before moving into the process, is simply on the question of noting that you are an ex officio member of the Odenwald Fund Board, Trust Fund Board, and just for the information of members, this was a body established many years ago to support the twinning links with the Odenwald in Germany. It hasn't, I think, given any funds out for some time, but there is a pending application which just requires us to have something on record that Provost use it as the Council's trustee from your office as Provost. Otherwise, Provost, I think the appropriate thing to do would be simply to move into each of the appointments in the order as set out in the recommendations. So the first of these is to appoint a convener of the executives, and that requires for nominations from the floor.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to propose the Group Leader and Leader of Falkirk Council, Cecil Miko John. Like yourself, Provost, we saw evidence of the fairness and indeed control she evidenced at the last executive meeting, which she chaired, and I'd be happy to propose her.
I'm happy to second, Provost.
Anybody otherwise minded? Any other nominations that agreed then? Agreed. Thank you.
And Provost, in consequence of that, the SNP group now hold 2 out of the tripartite arrangement, so I wonder if Deputy Provost Ritchie, you're confirming that you would stand down from the convenership of the Scrutiny Committee External. That being the case, and the convenership of the Scrutiny Committee being held by Councillor Munro from the Conservative group, it would be a matter of a nomination of a Labour group member of the Scrutiny Committee External to take that convenership.
Provost, I'd like to get back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
That would be a council appointment, Provost, which would take place then at the next council meeting. There being no appointed convener of the committee, the consequence would be that a convener would be appointed from the membership of the committee at its next meeting, for that meeting only, and then the council can resume consideration of the matter at its next meeting.
I think it should be noted there is 2 independents who are not on the scrutiny or the executive.
Provost, I wonder if you'd have a short recess to discuss that point, the convenership of the Scrutiny Committee. 10 minutes?
I'm open to that.
Provost, just a clarification. 2 independents. We got 4 independents. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're aware of the meeting tomorrow, so 10 minutes, everybody happy with that?
Unless there's anything particularly controversial, could we perhaps deal with the other appointments first and then come back to that one? That would be...
Everybody happy with that? Sounds fine. Carry on then, leave that one again.
Thank you, Provost. That takes us on to recommendation 3, which is to consider whether to make an appointment to the position of the Deputy Convener of the Appeals Committee, and if so minded to make that appointment. So the question is, are there any nominations for that position?
Any nominations? Councillor John.
Provost, in the past that was held by a member of the opposition. I don't know whether anybody from the Appeals Committee would be interested in taking on that role.
Well, bring in Councillor Nicholl.
I would like to nominate Councillor John Patrick, Provost. Just on a more general point, Provost, since the statutory meeting back in 2017, I think, I don't want to use the term, things have got a bit messy, but there are things that obviously there's a willingness now to allow the administration to take, I would look at, let's say, more responsibility for actions regarding external appointments such as those in COSLA, Health Board, etc. And I think perhaps it would be an idea if the 3 group leaders sat down and just discussed whether or not the decisions that were taken 2 years ago are now appropriate for the administration as it goes forward over the second half of its term. So it's just a general suggestion that I'm just sat here thinking, convener, that we really should be looking, not hogging positions for the sake of hogging positions, I would argue, but looking what is the best way to distribute posts for the people, best for the Falkirk Council and the people in which we serve. So it's just an idea going through my head as we speak.
I'm looking for a second if you propose. External appointment. Yeah.
Happy to second that, Provost.
Okay. So we agree to that then?
Provost, perhaps it would be appropriate for me to say that yes, I would be prepared to accept the nomination, though I'm truly flattered as an ordinary councillor and not a senior councillor to be nominated.
Thank you for those words of wisdom. Mr. Beattie?
Yes, thank you, Provost. Councillor Patrick is duly appointed, and we turn to recommendation 4, which is to appoint a chairperson of the Integration Joint Board, and just advise members that the Council has the convenership of the Integration Joint Board for 2 years, starting in the 1st of May, and the appointment should be made from one of the current members of the Integration Joint Board, who are Councillors Meikle-John, Colley and Black.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I have great pleasure in nominating my colleague Councillor Colley. You've heard her speak this morning in and around the work of the Integrated Joint Board and the Health and Social Care Partnership. I think their knowledge and skills are a great asset to this Council as a whole, and I'm sure she will do a fantastic job as convener in pushing forward the integration of health and social care in Falkirk.
Thank you. We've got a second there.
Formally second.
Any other nominations? We're all agreed with that? Agreed, thank you. Keep it moving.
Yes. Moving on then, Provost, we come to recommendation number 5, which is to appoint a representative to the COSLA Children and Young People Board.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Provost, I would have pleasure in nominating my colleague Councillor Adana McHugh as the lead from within that particular area. I think there's a great potential to share some of the work that's happening in Falkirk and to learn from others and influence indeed government policy as part of being involved with the COSLA boards, and I'm sure that she'll do a great job.
Okay, thank you. A second for that, Councillor?
Great pleasure in seconding.
Thank you, sir. Any other nominations? Agreed? Agreed, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh is duly appointed, and we turn, Provost, to number 6, which is the appointment to the COSLA Health and Social Care Board.
Okay, Councillor Meikle-John again.
Similarly, it fits very appropriately with the role of the portfolio holder within health and social care, Councillor Macaulay, and I would therefore nominate Fiona. I've already given her plaudits, so I won't go through that again.
Formally second.
Okay, thank you. Any other nominations? Are we agreed? Agreed. Councillor Colley. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Colley is duly appointed, and I think that takes us to the recess requested by Councillor Ellis.
Okay, then that's 3:15, 25 past. Thank you. We'll just clarify the situation first. Mr Moody, just like to clarify why we had the recess there, and then we'll go back to Councillor Bissett.
Yes, thank you, Provost. This was just returning to recommendation 2 in the report, and it was to make an appointment to the Scrutiny Committee external and from among the Labour members of that committee.
Councillor Bissett.
Provost, I'd like to nominate Councillor Jim Blackwood for external scrutiny convener.
Thank you. We got a second there? Have we agreed? Everybody agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to deeds. Paid. Agreed.
I wonder, Provost, if make information on one. I'm sorry to hold up things, but it's just in case I forget to ask after the meeting. It's the disposition to CTR Hay for the land at Wearings Hall Bowman. If we could have some details of that after the meeting, obviously, just in case I forget.
Okay, that takes us now to mixed-use development to include a mixture of tenure village including mode. And it's item 11, it's for a mixed-use development, and Mr Dryden will be given the report. It's pages 61 to 101. Mr Dryden, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. You'll be aware of this application previously when this was determined by yourselves in December of 2017, where you were minded to grant the decision subject to the satisfactory conclusion of a Section 75 planning obligation. The details of that are in paragraph 1 of your update report. Also attached in Appendix 2 is the full report which explains the actual background to this application. I would add that you're not being asked again today to consider this application again in its entirety. All we're asking in this update report is that we have been in discussions with the applicant in resolving the matters, the heads of terms in the planning obligation, and it's the third bullet point in paragraph 1 that we're asking for your consideration again on this matter. That relates to provision of the new bridge crossing of the Union Canal. As you will see from the update report, there is progress has been made on other bullet points, heads of terms. There is one matter that still is to be resolved, and that relates to identification in conjunction with NHS Fort Valley, but progress has been made on that matter, but it's still outstanding. The other matters are more or less at a stage where we are of a view that we could secure the agreement of these matters between ourselves and the applicant themselves. The reason this has come back before you this morning is outlined in the update report. You will see particularly in paragraph 4 that the applicant wants to pursue an alternative to the new bridge crossing. There are matters raised, you'll see the details of which are in paragraph 4 relating to third-party interests. The fact is that the Union Canal being a scheduled ancient monument, there's also further applications, consents that will be required to achieve the bridge over and above any other permissions required through the planning process. In paragraph 5 before you, you will see that officers in principle were amenable to consideration of an alternative to the new bridge, and these are in 3 bullet points in paragraph 5. These were namely options looked at were threefold. One was to rely and utilise the existing Nicolton Road underpass, and then obviously access the canal on its northern boundary. There was also consideration given to utilising the existing A801 to the east of the site, where there is obviously the bridge that crosses the canal, and some adaptation of the bridge to accommodate pedestrian access. And finally, the other option that was looked at was to utilise an existing bridge called the Falkirk Bridge, which is to the west of the application site. You will see from the consideration of the options in paragraph 6, concerns were raised following discussion with our colleagues in roads, that particularly utilising the existing Nicolton Road underpass and also utilising the existing A801 bridge access, there were concerns about the conflict with road users' pedestrian safety. So for those reasons, these options were ruled out by officers. This left officers to conclude that the only available option that officers could support was utilising the existing Falkirk Bridge to the west. And obviously, in acknowledging that option, it does acknowledge also that this would be a bit of a circuitous route for particularly anybody who wanted to, who was on the site, to access, go east. They have to go west, first of all, to the Falkirk Bridge, and then return on the other canal bank going east. However, notwithstanding that, it is the view that creating the western access option on the southern bank would also open up access into Brightons through Erkle Avenue, and would also allow opportunities for walking to Pullman and to the railway station. And on balance, this is still considered by officers to meet the best interests of sustainable development. So with that in mind, Provost, it is the view of officers that the third option to utilise the existing Falkirk Bridge would be supported by officers, and the recommendation is reflected in this view of officers. And while the general terms and the heads of terms do not change, the new footpath infrastructure connection in bullet point 3 on paragraph 10 reflects the officers' view. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up, just to say that Mr Dryden simplified the situation with this application. It's went through the full process of a predetermination hearing, which included a site visit. It came before Council in December. It was agreed to, minded to grant, and it's back here only for an amendment relating to the Section 75, so I have no hesitation in moving to grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I'm disagreeing with you. I don't agree that we should allow these conditions to be amended. I think when Council gives a minded to grant...
On a point of order, should we not have a seconder first for your motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think when Council gives a minded to grant decision, it's implicit that the developer adheres to these conditions upon which that decision was made. When 15 members supported this proposal, one of the conditions was the provision of a new bridge. On page 83 of our report, item 7A 3.5, it specifically says that the applicant has expressed a willingness to bring forward delivery of a bridge crossing the Union Canal. This would provide improved access to the canal towpath, which is a strategic long-distance walking and cycling corridor. Now, of the 3 options suggested, 2 have already been dismissed, as we've heard from Mr Dryden, as being unsuitable. And the third one I would suggest is equally unsuitable. This proposal is for a care village, complete with a care home, retirement housing and supported housing, which makes me wonder why we would agree that a suitable access route, as the report acknowledges, would be somewhat circuitous. I think that, as Mr Dryden said, how am I going to try and say circuitous again? How much of a distance are we talking about here?
Yes, Councillor, I can advise you that it is around 800 metres, which you know money is half a mile. So it would be 800 metres going west to the bridge, and if you wanted to go east, you didn't have to go back. So it would be, if you're going to want to go east, it would be a mile round. It would be a mile round trip. It's approximately 800 metres to the west of the proposed bridge location.
And given the, as I say, the demographics of the people that we're looking to provide for here, so it's a mile extra on that journey, rather than sticking to the conditions that were originally promised when this was minded to grant.
If they were going to go east, yes, that's the case.
Okay. I think the other point I would like to make is that in our own policy for walking and cycling, that pedestrian routes in any new development should be accessible to all, and that proposed alternative would not be accessible to all in my mind. I think acknowledging the complexity of this matter, given that the Section 75 has not yet been completed, and this was over 15 months ago that we took that decision, the obligation will require to be, I would like to state that the obligation should require to be completed and fully signed within 6 months from this date, failing which the application would be brought back by officers to the next appropriate council meeting for further consideration and potential refusal. So if that was a motion, I'll make this as an amendment. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to second that, given that the proposal is for a steep step path. I don't think it's accessible.
Have you got a copy of the amendment handy there?
Some of it's written there.
Does members want any clarification again to Councillor Coons on amendment?
Can I ask Councillor Coons just to repeat the latter part of the amendment?
The latter part?
Yes. I get the message that you're against the application. That's no problem. We've got that part. It's the part with the conditions that timescales.
For coming back. So, yeah, basically I think that developers should do what they promised to do when the original decision was made. The bit about coming back, the fact that it's been 15 months since the decision was made, is that what you mean? That I think we should...
Well, I'm just asking if you need that part of the amendment back.
Right, so given that the Section 75 hasn't been signed, is that the part you're talking about? Section 75 hasn't been completed over a period of 15 months since the minded to grant decision. That the obligation would require, I would require the obligation to be completed and fully signed off within 6 months of today's date. Failing which, the application would be brought back by officers to the next appropriate council meeting for further consideration and therefore potential refusal if they are not meeting the conditions of the original agreement.
Provost, can I ask the Chief Planning Officer to comment on that? I'd like some advice.
Thank you, Mr. Driver here.
Yes, happy to advise. As things stand, as I've said, we're only looking at the option which relates to the footpath provision, and obviously there's an amendment now being put forward to stick with obviously the original provision, and obviously that decision be taken, and the timescale that's been put forward, that's something then that obviously the officers and the applicant will have to take into consideration, and will obviously carry out the actions of this committee. And as I say, we'll enter into a dialogue, as we already have been doing, with the applicant, and obviously they will be aware of that timescale, and we will obviously bring back a report to the committee outlining where we are if we get to a situation where we're not in a position to have that particular aspect signed off within that 6 month timescale at the most appropriate full council meeting.
Provost, I'm grateful for that clarification. I'm still a wee bit concerned, though. The first part, in terms of the rejection, of course, is an either or in terms of a decision. It's the additional conditions that have been put on. Will that weaken the Council's case should we decide to reject the application? What's the advice on that? What's the advice with regards to the precedent that's set? You know, talking 6 months for a development this size, it's a significant development. I'm just wondering if that may be counterproductive in terms of that aspect of the amendment.
Promise I can come back in there just to, I think, what the points that are being raised by Councillor Alexander. I think what we will do, obviously, we have clearly want, if this is granted today, along with to stick to the status quo, clearly, and the timescale, we will engage with the applicant, as I've already said, and we will obviously actively pursue, obviously, this end result within that time frame. Obviously, if we get to a situation as we get close to the 6-month period, and we're not in that position, clearly we will also raise and we will take advice on the points that you're raising, and we will bring back a report which will cover these aspects and give the options that are open to you. Because clearly, obviously, it is a complex matter. But certainly, we will, as we move towards that 6-month period, and certainly if we find ourselves in a position not to conclude, we will obviously start to prepare a report, and we'll take advice at the same time, and we'll bring back a report with the options that are available to you, and it will also be a measured report to show the risks involved in potentially taking various scenarios and options that have been discussed here.
Final question, Provost. There's an issue of non-determination. Can I ask if there's any concerns with regards to the officer for the applicant to claim non-determination?
I think at this point in time, obviously, we are in a situation where clearly the applicant obviously has been in an active dialogue with officers to reflect the decision that was taken back in December of 2017. At this point in time, there's no indication to suggest that is an option that they will pursue, and we have to check the dates and where we are. I think at this point in time, we have an active dialogue, as I've already said. Most of the matters, the exception being the ongoing issue with NHS Forth Valley, which we are in an active dialogue with them as well. They are clearly showing a commitment to get this over the line, so to speak. So at this point in time, there's nothing to suggest that that is an option open to them, or we will take that route. But clearly, if circumstances do change in the coming months, then clearly we will keep you advised and we will prepare a report accordingly to reflect that.
Okay. Provost, can you give notice of possible further amendment?
Right, okay. I'll bring Mr. Nugent and then go to Councillor Cole. Thank you.
Provost, just very briefly, it's maybe worth just noting for the benefit of Council that the 6-month clause found at the end of Councillor Coombe's amendment is not unusual in relation to minded to grant decisions within this authority where there is a planning agreement to be concluded. And maybe in reference to one of the points made by Councillor Alexander, the 6-month period is not to complete the development, it's to conclude the planning agreement, which is referred to in the minded to grant decision.
Thank you, Provost. Could I first of all intimate I may have to leave the meeting early. There's a meeting of the Scotland Educational Trust in Stirling at 2, and the chairman's a bit doubtful, and I've got to take the chair, so my apologies if I've got to leave. What's causing me some concern is, and the reason I voted against the application initially, was the fact that the NHS hadn't responded to requests for their views on the matter. And I see that's still the case, although there is discussions going on. And their contribution is essential to this application. I'm just wondering why, after 15 months, there appears to be a reluctance on the part of NHS to stick their neck out in this particular application.
Yes, Provost, I can advise Councillor Reid that there is an active ongoing dialogue with Forth Valley at this point in time. My understanding is there's a meeting scheduled later this week with officers on this particular aspect, although there's a continuing dialogue because this is a wider issue, as you'll be aware of, in terms of planning considerations amongst many. As things stand at the moment, clearly we are at the stage of where the NHS Forth Valley recognise that the guideline that is currently out there is out of date, and we are hopeful and optimistic that we will, in further meetings with them, which are happening imminently and probably will follow thereafter, that we should be in a position to bring and conclude that particular aspect in the coming months, where we understand that we will be getting further information from them to allow us to update our guidance and obviously the calculation that we use in the formula that we use.
Just to get clear on that point, so should there be any objection from NHS that would come back here because they would have been able to satisfy the Section 75?
That's correct, because clearly it was a decision taken by full council, and therefore this was one key component as well as the bridge issue that's been debated today. So clearly, if there are any change in the circumstances that we can't satisfy that particular matter, then we'll have to do a similar exercise to bring this back to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Councillor Black and
Councillor Black can go first.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Well, I'm not really happy to go with the recommendations, Provost, but that option under the circumstances is probably the best one to go with. I have had previous dealings with Scottish Canals, a great organisation, but their decision-making structures are quite laborious, and I can see that probably that and all of this. That could take years for any decision to be made, so that's why I'm happy to go with the recommendations. I have been involved before, and something we thought would take a year took 3.
Okay, thank you for that.
Provost, I think we should always try and stick to consistency, and with no disrespect to my colleague, she advised us this morning quite rightly that we should all be more fit, we should go out and do more walking and more cycling. So I didn't think having to walk a mile only on one side, if you want, depending what side you want to go to, would be too much a challenge. In fact, if it was a challenge, it might help the residents of the Haining, if that's what they call it. I don't know what they call the place. The other thing is consistency. I'm aware, I'm not on the planning, but I'm aware over the years that the NHS have failed to make the proper recommendations in time and answer the proper questions. Now, I think it would really be totally out of all realms of reasonableness to say that we're going to wait for the Health Board, when the Health Board might just say, well, look, we're kind of busy now, you might be waiting for this for a year just now. I assume that officers are content with the situation, although officers will react, obviously, to the decision of the Council. But if officers are content, well, they keep us right, they're the guardians. But as I say, it's our decision. And when I hear officers tell us that the best of the 3 options is the one that we've got the new, in their professional opinion, I didn't see a problem with it at all. I must be honest and say that.
Thank you. Just to reiterate where we are, we've got a motion by myself, seconded by the Councillor Grant, to approve the recommendations contained within the report. We have an amendment by Councillor Coombs, seconded by Councillor Richardson, in relation to that the amendment that Councillor Coombs came up, which we can ratify. So, does anybody else want to come and vote on that one? Because we've got the possibility of a further amendment coming forward to Councillor Alexander. Is that right, sir? Okay, so we'll vote then for
the... I didn't think we were maybe quite finished, and I'm still trying to sort this a bit out in my mind. I'm just wondering about the implications of the viability of the project, assuming that we get to an agreement around the Section 75 from the NHS. In order to be able to take even parts of the project forward without the negotiations around the bridge being concluded, will that hold things up? I'm very aware that, from what Councillor Black has said around the discussions, it can take a long time. But I think I would want to know a wee bit more about what discussions have been had and what the barriers were with the original proposal and having to go to this new proposal. I think that would maybe be helpful in having an understanding, and perhaps there's maybe something that we could assist with that would allow the original.
I'm happy to answer that for you, Councillor Rico John. I think, as you'll see in the update report, you will see, particularly in paragraph 4, the applicant has had, obviously there has been some discussions, but you will see clearly the third party that involves Scottish Canals, as I understand it. Obviously, I also mentioned the fact that historic environment in Scotland would also have to be consulted, and more importantly actually be asked to determine scheduled ancient monument consent given the status of the Union Canal. I think really the option that has been put forward and the one that's been favoured by officers is, in terms of the applicant's view, clearly it's land in his control. Any other land that's not in the control is involved with the council. Obviously there's involved crossing Nicolton Road, again Nicolton Road being responsible for maintenance of the road for the council. So again there is less parties involved in that potential option, albeit the issue being it would be a more circuitous route if you wanted to go east. So in short, I think the main reason is that there's other third parties and who maybe don't operate to the same timelines. So the more parties you involve in an option, then clearly there's more risk of timescale being protracted, and clearly that's what the applicant is trying to avoid and to try and move this element forward. The applicant has made it quite clear they're not against the principle of obviously access across the canal that was mentioned in the proposal, but on reflection it's quite clear that there are more problems with the option of a new footbridge for the reasons outlined in paragraph 4, and it's felt that the more risk-averse option really is to deal with taking the option that the officers are recommending, that we utilise the southern bank going westwards first of all and to access into the Falkirk Bridge. And again, the key thing is to get these terms and heads of terms over the line to sign the planning obligation, and in doing so then we can then issue the planning permission with the respective conditions, and bearing in mind this is an application for planning permission principle, so quite clearly there's still a lot of work to be done, and given the scale of it, it will take a few years for this to come forward, and I actually fully expect it will be done in a phased manner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll go to the vote for the first item. The motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Khan, and the amendment moved by, I think we should read out the amendment again. Is it possible to maybe just for clarification? The motion is simple. I'm just going with the officer's recommendation contained within the report.
It's not the precursor, just
the books and voices.
Acknowledging right. Given that the Section 75 hasn't been completed over the period of 15 months since December 2017, when we gave our minded to grant decision, can I just point out that Councillor Goldie was saying we should listen to the officer recommendation. I want it to be noted that at that point the officer recommendation was to refuse.
Can I just point out, I wasn't there, I'm listening to the officer's recommendation today.
Yes, carry on, Councillor Goldie.
So, given that it was 15 months ago, the obligation will require to be completed and fully signed for the Section 75 within 6 months of today's date, failing which the application would be brought back by officers to the next appropriate council meeting for further consideration and potential refusal, which I think I've put to bed.
Okay, I think you've clarified that one. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Wade, will go to the vote on this one?
Yes, thank you, Provost. And just to confirm, the motion is moved by you, seconded by Councillor Grant. It consists of the recommendations set out in paragraph 10, with an amendment moved by Councillor Coombs and seconded by Councillor Aitchison, which is to adhere to the original decision, so to reinstate the requirement in relation to the new bridge, plus the additional clause in relation to the agreement required to be completed within 6 months. So that's the amendment. Provost Buchanan.
Recommendation.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Amendment.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Abstain.
Councillor Balfour.
Abstain.
Councillor Binney.
Abstain.
Councillor Bissett.
Motion.
Councillor Black.
Motion.
Councillor Blackwood.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
Councillor Coleman.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Garner.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Councillor Grant.
Motion.
Councillor Harris.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Amendment.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Motion.
Councillor Monroe.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Patrick. Councillor Rita's gone, and Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 13 votes for the motion. There are 9 votes for the amendment. There were 3 abstentions. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Now have the possibility of a further amendment. The Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Provost. The report, the way it's written, looks as if we have 3 choices for crossing. We actually have 4, and that's been pointed out by a number of members in relation to the original decision taken by the Council on the 6th of December 2017. We can go back to that particular position, or we can change the position accordingly. My concern is, the fact that, Provost, is the fact that there's an elephant in the room, if you like, and that's Scottish Canals. The organisation themselves, as Councillor Black has said, is a very worthy organisation, but I don't think we should be making decisions based on the likely delay or otherwise of Scottish Canals. We have a proposal before us in terms of the original documentation, which I think was quite clear at that time, and I think we need to be clearer it's kept, the better. The more complex it becomes, the more difficult it becomes for officers to defend against this position with regards to any complaints, whatever, in terms of non-determination, in terms of any other area where notice of appeal. So with that Provost, my gut reaction at the time was that Councillor I'm going to say Patterson, Councillor Coombs was on the right road until she concluded with the delays that she was proposing. My advice and my amendment would be to have a straightforward rejection of the application, and with no time scale, no additional addendum there, for the simple reason that I think we are opening the door to potential challenge, and the fewer challenges there are, the better. The onus is not on us to deliver this particular planning application. The onus is on the developer. That goes without saying. And so our role must be to act in a responsible manner, both in terms of the treatment of the applicant, the treatment of the application itself, but also for the local authority and within the planning guidelines that we operate under. And I think that, as I said, the more clear cut these are, the better. So I would formally move the reject the application as per the report that's before us today, and we delete the references that were made as part of the amendment and with regards to timescale, etc.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Alexander. We'll just get clarity on this issue, because as Mr Dryden says initially when he opened up, we weren't here to revisit the application as such. We're here to discuss and take a view on this change in relation to the crossing. But I'm going to take some legal advice on this in relation to, because you simplified it, you want to reject the application in its entirety. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the application before us today is an application to change the Section 75, right, effectively. So the original application was approved.
Right.
No difficulty with that at all. But so what we're moving against is the requirement to change from a position where we build a new bridge, or the developer build a new bridge, to the 3 options that we've got before us in terms of route.
Okay, thank you. Just clarify that position, because obviously Councillor Coombs' amendment initially was focusing on the canal crossing. So is that competent?
Yes. Yeah, in my view, it is a competent amendment, Provost, and as I understand Councillor Alexander's amendment, it's simply to adhere to the original decision taken by Council in December 2017, which is to maintain the minded to grant decision with the requirement for a bridge.
Exactly. Right. That's okay. You understand that, and that will go against the accountable. Okay? Just go to the vote then. Okay.
Well, that's can I second it, and also obviously the consideration of the amount of time it's taken already. The paper almost reads as it's a bit difficult getting the bridge over here, and that's why particularly I like David's motion in this, so I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Provost. Motion.
Motion.
Sorry, I've done that. I've read it the wrong way. I'll start again. Pretend that didn't happen. Struck from the record, if we're allowed to say that here.
By the way, we're being recorded. Anyway.
That's not making me feel better, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Original motion.
Deputy Provost Rich.
Other amendment.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Other amendment.
Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett.
Motion.
Councillor Black.
Original motion.
Councillor Blackwood.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Further amendment.
Councillor Coleman.
Further amendment.
Councillor Coombs.
Further amendment.
Councillor Garner.
Further amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Substantive.
Councillor Grant.
Motion.
Councillor Harris.
Further motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Further amendment.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Patrick. And Councillor Spears.
Further amendment.
Provost, there are 12 votes for the motion, there are 13 votes for the amendment, and the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, that takes us to item 11 on your agenda, the motion. It's been agreed by all members, the leader and the leader of the opposition groups, that this is referred to the executive. Thank you very much. Thank you. Fine. On your agenda, the motion. It's been agreed by all members, the leader and the leader of the opposition groups, that this is referred to the executive. Thank you very much. Thank you.